Welcome everyone to another episode of Tutorial Tuesday. It's week 15, 2020. I'm so glad that you're along with us. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for participating and sharing. I have a few announcements and then we'll get right into your questions. Announcement number one, I want to take a second and thank my friend Mike out at Great Basin Hat Company for the new lid that I'm wearing today. I really appreciate it. It fits fantastic. He's got a spring sale going on, so check that out. Announcement number two, Joe and I released episode 8 of the Small Business Roundup podcast. You'll want to tune into that because she and I talk about how we're responding as business owners to this virus crisis. So tune in. Announcement number 3, just a reminder, I still have spots open for the September workshop out in South Dakota with Jen Zeller, aka the South Dakota Cowgirl. Swipe over. Great first question. Thank you for asking. I can tell you that as a photographer, as an artist, as a creative, I don't fall into the camp where all your images need to be consistent from an editing perspective. In fact, I would say this. So what does that mean, having a consistent voice? It means that you've had the time to develop your style, that when you go out, you're looking for those hero shots at sunset, or during the day, you're looking for bounce light, or something like that. I'll use myself as an example. If you look back over my images, my editing technique has changed, my style has changed, but my voice remains consistent. And what I would encourage you to do is develop your voice, which will develop your style. Now, if you've gone through all of this and you're telling yourself, yeah, but I just want that same consistent yellow skin tone and crushed blacks, then I would tell you, look at the times of day and the type of light that you're shooting in and repeat that over and over. So to get that consistency, what I would recommend is pay attention to the lighting that you're using and the time of day that you're using it. So is it backlight at 7:30 on a summer night and you're using XYZ Visco preset to crush black? The last thing that I'll add here is this. Presets don't make an image. You make an image. And it's your expertise, it's your troubleshooting, it's your experience in the industry that will do the best for our clients. Really great question here. In fact, very in-depth editing. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to post a couple pictures and then I'll walk you through what I did in editing and hopefully that answers your question. In those before and after images of Cole as he's working some cows, what I'm doing is I'm flattening out that image in Lightroom and then taking it into Photoshop, adding contrast and clarity in there. Now, with your specific question about flattening out your image, what you'll want to do is add that contrast back in, but if you're flattening it out and not doing anything else, then you're definitely going to have that problem as you export it. So I would encourage you to add in, maybe use Nick Effects or Alien Skin or something like that that's going to add in some clarity and contrast in your image, or you can also do that in Lightroom as well. Now let's go through one more example, and this is of Joe. This is a tutorial on my YouTube channel. You can go ahead and swipe over and watch this whole thing. Now, in that image of Joe, what I'm doing in studio, two different images, one out on location, the other in studio here, but I'm applying a very similar technique. And with that picture, you can go to my YouTube channel, swipe over to see that, and you can watch the whole tutorial when I edit that picture and get the final outcome. But in general, what I'm doing is I'm flattening out the image and then adding contrast and clarity back in using Photoshop and those plugins like Alien Skin and Nick Effects. So enjoy that. Good timing for this question. What I'm doing is trying to find things around the house, in the studio, that speak to me creatively. And what that is this saddle, or it's Joe, or it's something like that. The second part of the creative process for me, staying sharp here in quarantine, is the editing. So when I create the portrait of Joe or the saddle, it's playing around in editing as well and using that as a blank canvas. For me, what I do in this process is I edit my images and then I upload them to a Dropbox folder for social media feeds, and then I copy them from that Dropbox folder on my phone and post from there. I just want to take a second and acknowledge this response and just reaffirm that, again, it is not a preset that makes an image, it's you. You're the one that makes the image. I probably have more questions and answers for your original question, but thank you for asking it. The first thing that I would tell you, just from a business owner's perspective, is depending on the kind of ranch that you want to start, and really that doesn't even matter, what matters is that you get out there and that you network with other ranchers, that you network with other photographers. How do you do that? You reach out. Who's around the area that you want to get into? Are you up in Laramie, Wyoming? Well, find out who ranches up in Laramie, Wyoming, and network with them. Find out who the photographers are up there and network with them. The next thing here is within the Western world, and really this is the fundamental part of my platform, and that is there is no shortage of people out there that are willing to drop what they're doing and help you in times of need. And you need to reciprocate that. So for me, as a photographer, what I do is make sure that I give back to the community that I serve as well. And you need to make sure that you're doing the same thing. So don't be afraid to get dirty. There is no job above anybody else. You're not too good to mop a floor or sweep a floor. So just be humble about it and be willing to help. Okay, I'm going to preempt the next question by posting the whole thing. It's kind of funny to talk about, but let's talk about it. Okay, funny but not ha-ha funny, right? So there are legitimate issues or challenges out there as we see people spending more time together at home. Domestic violence calls are on the rise, along with, let's get personal for 15 seconds here. If you or someone you know is struggling out there, don't be afraid to reach out for help. There are therapists out there. There are people that are willing to help you, and don't be afraid to reach out to them. I'll give you a personal example using myself. I had a very personal and very emotional photo shoot, and I didn't have the emotional tools to deal with the aftermath of it, and I went to a therapist seeking help as well. Long story short, I confided in another photographer, a friend of mine. He was there for me, and he encouraged, and he also sought out a therapist help. So don't be afraid to seek out help, you guys. It's really out there for us to get better. Jake, thank you for your compliment. I appreciate that. And of course, thanks out to Great Basin Hat Company. Check out their spring sale. This is a great question. Thank you for asking it. And it's very fundamental to what we do in photography. And it's part of the photography nomenclature too. Full frame cameras versus crop sensor cameras. Let's talk about it. Okay, the first thing that people will tell you about a crop sensor versus a full frame is this is the sensor size of a full frame camera, and this is the sensor size of a crop sensor camera. Physically, the full frame sensor is bigger. So the second thing with a full frame sensor versus a crop sensor is if you take the same picture at the same focal length with the same perspective with a full frame versus a crop, the crop sensor is going to be a tighter image. With a full frame camera, you're going to have a greater depth of field and better what they call bokeh, or that blurriness behind your subject. That's with a full frame camera versus the crop sensor camera. Another thing about full frame sensors versus crop sensors is in the camera models, you're going to find that there's a cheaper price point on the crop sensor cameras versus the full frame cameras. But I guarantee you, if you buy a personally, I recall when I got my first full frame camera and I went out and took some pictures, there was such a drastic difference between the dynamic range, the tonal contrast in the images that was captured was amazing. All of this said about crop sensors versus full frame sensors and what they are, let me show you an example of a couple pictures taken with a 7D Mark II, which has a crop sensor on it. The final thing that I'll tell you here about the crop sensor versus full frame, if you take a 50mm lens and you put it on a crop sensor body, it's going to be like an 80mm lens, and some people really like that. As is most things in photography, it's not that a crop sensor or a full frame is better or worse than the other. It's you as a photographer knowing the tools you have to effectively communicate your vision. Florida sounds like a fantastic getaway from all this pandemic garbage, especially once it's over. Thank you so much for the invite, and thank you for tuning in. Bonner, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for the compliment. I really appreciate that. Hope you and your family are staying safe during these times. Hey, Emily, I don't personally know any photographers in Tennessee, but let's call it a shout out. If you're a photographer in Tennessee, hit Emily up. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, Andrea, thanks for the question. As far as lenses, my 70-200 and my 16-35 are my go-to lenses. My 70-200 is my workhorse when it comes to portraits and brandings and things like that. But my most creative lens that I joke about is my 16-35. That one really puts you in the action, and it's a very in-your-face kind of lens. You really have to learn to use that lens. And other than that, I have a 50mm prime that I use as well, but primarily it's the 70-200 and 16-35. Thanks for the question.